What will Germany look like when Angela Merkel quits as her country's Chancellor in September after 16 years in power? You know, for years she seemed like a steadying influence, but COVID vaccinations are taking so long that her popularity is plummeting. Perhaps she stayed too long. This is Roundtable. Very good to have your company. I'm David Foster. So what is Mutti, Mother Merkel's legacy? And is a generation that has known only her at the helm and is about to vote for the very first time going to go for real change? Coronavirus rates continue to rise in Germany, with more than 3 million cases. Analysts say the country's vaccination rollout was slow compared to other European countries like the United Kingdom, but that it is now picking up pace. The Chancellor Angela Merkel has been criticised for her apparent indecisiveness over lockdowns. After deciding on a shutdown for Easter, she made a U-turn and took responsibility for it.
A mistake must be called a mistake, and more importantly, it must be corrected, and if possible, in time. I know that this proposal has caused additional uncertainty. I deeply regret this, and for this, I ask for the forgiveness of all citizens.
But Merkel has apparently changed tack again and is now in favour of a short lockdown and plans to take control of Germany's federal COVID-19 response. A year ago, Germany was praised for its handling of the virus, so her critics are wondering now what went wrong. During her 16 years of leadership, Merkel won praise for her handling of issues like the Eurozone debt crisis and the migrant crisis. She will step down as Chancellor after the election in September. Will Angela Merkel take control of Germany's COVID-19 crisis, and could that define how she's remembered as leader? Okay, let's kick off the discussion first of all by going to Washington, D.C., where we can see Joyce Mushaben, author of Becoming Madam Chancellor Angela Merkel in the Berlin Republic. We cross to Brussels, and there we see Sergey Lagodinsky, member of the European Parliament for Alliance 90, the Greens. And then to Berlin, Melanie Whittaker joins us from there. She's head of membership and development at the German Marshall Fund Leadership Programme. Melanie, I'll start with you, but this is for any one of you if you want to jump in just a second. She keeps changing her mind. She's had this meeting recently where she said, look, to stop a third wave, we've got to have stricter rules. She's bringing powers back to the federal government away from the Bavarian states and other states in Germany. Does she really know what she's up to?
I think she does. I think we're also finding ourselves in a situation where there are a confluence of things happening. The uncertainty of the external circumstances of the pandemic is coming, at her, and she's a scientist by training, so she likes to work with facts. And whenever there are new facts coming or new data coming her way, she's trying to make sense of them. So she's trying to adapt, life with the goings on that she's been confronted with. That would be my take on it. It's not that she keeps changing her mind willy-nilly. It's based on information and data that she's being presented with.
But Sergey, let me put this one to you. She seems a weaker figure now than she was at the beginning of the pandemic. You say she was a legend then, and now she seems rather tired.
Yes, the pandemics has taken its toll. We have a totally different chancellor than we used to have a year ago. Actually, even a year ago when the pandemics started, she still projected some leadership. Many people admired her way of this scientific, very sober way of analyzing the dynamics. And ever since, once it was apparent that she is not able to hold the country together, literally, because of the federalist divisions that we have experienced, She drove a kind of a handoff approach, and that approach has damaged her significantly.
Okay, so she's in a bit of trouble at the moment. Joyce, let me come to you. She wasn't always seen as this. She was seen as a very dynamic figure. She changed Germany for sure. In researching and writing your book, what kind of character did you come across?
Well, the character that I discovered causes me to actually contradict these other two participants, in part because I'm an outsider, and so I see the world, their world, a little bit differently. I think that Merkel has been pretty consistent throughout. She has a very calm demeanor. She is, as Melanie noted, very driven by data. She likes to think her way through problems. The difficulty she's having now is, as Sergey pointed out, with the Landesfürstchen, these state princes who are already jockeying in terms of the September 2021 elections. Her position has been very consistent since the outbreak of this pandemic, but the fact that they have all broken off and tried to head in their own directions is the source of her current ostensible weakness. She is a person who really does think in pragmatic, non-ideological terms, and that's sometimes a source of irritation to various party factions. But for the most part, I think that her behavior has been very consistent given what she demonstrated across all of those earlier crises.
When you write in your book that she brought a cultural revolution to Germany, it's difficult to put my finger on what it is you actually mean. How did she change the country?
Well, I refer to her actually as a transformational leader. And one of the things that she's had on her side, of course, is that there's been substantial generational change since she assumed office in 2005. So she not only managed to win over a lot of younger citizens, irrespective of party, with her position on reconciling work and family, expanding ideas of maternal leave to parental leave so that men too have to assume different kinds of responsibilities. Her ability to admit that she makes mistakes or that she must change her course given the data that she sees in the example of Fukushima, and things along these lines. When she does not have a strong constituency, and she comes from a very tiny state of Mecklenburg, or represents a very tiny state of Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, she was pretty good at going out and finding other stakeholder groups. And it is their contribution to this more holistic approach to policy that I think has been very transformational in Germany.
Which will bring me to ask Sergey in just a moment, if I may, why the Greens supported Merkel. I know it was partly to do with the fact that she went against nuclear energy after Fukushima. Can we save that thought for just a moment? Because I want to ask Melanie about what kind of person you think she is. You describe her as having an aura.
I did say that. I have never spoken to her personally. I have encountered her, nearby or observed her in other meetings. And when I say she does leave an impression, is not in the same sense as if you've ever met Bill Clinton or hear about this kind of really strong charisma he's got. It's slightly different, but she leaves an impression. I mean, she's an impressive person when you meet her, when you see her. So she has definitely a presence with her. That is what I meant by there is an aura. It's not this.
And does she have something that other leaders don't, or is that just something you get by being in a position of power?
Her calmness, being stoic, being pragmatic. That is something that is continuous in her leadership.
Okay, and let me just read this out. This comes from Christian Lindner, who's the leader of the Liberal Free Democratic Party, and he's talking about the fact that she just won't change. He tweeted, "The Chancellor can no longer be sure about having the full support of her coalition. It would be advisable to hold a vote of confidence in the German parliament to gauge the ability of Ms. Merkel's government to perform." Well, she dismissed that out of hand, said there will not be a vote of confidence. But Sergey, let me come to you. Does she have the support of opposition parties such as your own as much as she used to?
Listen, the Greens are the smallest party currently in the Bundestag, in the German parliament. So it's not so much the Green support in the parliament itself. It's more of a Green support in the upper chamber, where you have the Bundesländer, the federal states, where, for example, the Green Prime Minister, Kretschmann from Baden-Württemberg, and many other Greens have a say. So, for example, if we're talking now about the new legislation that would centralize the efforts to combat the pandemics, I dare to propose that the Greens, both in the parliament, but most importantly in the upper chamber, would support this push. Why? Not because they are such fans of Merkel, but because they happen to coincide and agree with her on the course of actions. Because
but she was able, was she not, to reach across party divides? Joyce was mentioning the incidents of Fukushima, the leak at the Japanese nuclear reactor. The Greens loved the fact that she was able to say, well, that means we in Germany, we will no longer trust nuclear power. That was something that appealed to you, the fact that she was not party political all the time.
And there are plenty of things that Greens love and that appeal to the Greens, but that doesn't mean that the Greens support everything that the Chancellor proposes. The Greens remain in opposition. There is indeed kind of a love affair between the Green voters and the electorate and Merkel. And Merkel happens to be often more popular among those voters, Green voters, because for many various reasons. I don't think that Fukushima is the most important point. I think that Merkel's stance also on immigration issues during the refugees crisis was something that was the turning point, because Fukushima was perceived, and the stop of the nuclear power engagement in Germany was perceived more of a kind of an opportunistic move by Merkel. She was afraid after the Fukushima catastrophe to lose an important election, local election for their party, the regional elections. But the situation with refugees was a value-driven decision by Merkel, and this is something that appeals to, let's say, Green and centrist electorate. She is also someone who brought her party to the center. This is also very appealing. And I think one more thing, she has this kind of a I don't want to over-ethnicize or culturalize, but there is this appeal of kind of a Protestant stamina, of someone who works the problems through, based on pragmatic scientific basis. And this is something that resonates with a lot of Green voters.
Okay, so she's rather sensible, Joyce. Is that why she's known as Mutti, the mother of the nation? Because she can sort of sit back calmly and assess what she thinks is right for the German people?
Well, you have to recall that term Mutti Merkel was introduced by one of her rivals, Michael Gloss, during the first coalition, and it was intended as derogatory, particularly for a woman who was a female divorced physicist sitting in the Kohl cabinet. It is over time, because people became more convinced by her very pragmatic, data-driven approach, that they came to embrace it in a more positive sense of her really demonstrating over and over again her responsibility towards Germany. She uses the personal pronoun I. I had a very hard time making this decision. She uses simple language. I agree that it wasn't Fukushima that was a sort of normative turnaround for many other voters, but Fukushima gave people the sense that, she will be honest with us. She will correct her mistakes or admit when she's made them. And then by the time she gets to the migration refugee crisis, there are actually many laws that have been reformed in Germany between 2007 and 2013 that ease the situation of tolerated refugees, asylum seekers in Germany. So she had already sort of built a foundation for more trust. And I think ultimately people see her, as already stressed, as a person who is consistent in her principles. And that's not just the physicist part, and that's not just the pastor's daughter. This is a woman who spent 35 years in what they call the waiting room of democracy in Eastern Germany, who has a fundamental appreciation for human rights and the right to travel, freedom of movement, freedom of speech, because of those years of having been excluded.
And do you think perhaps that her gender counted against her, that were she a male chancellor, her successes would be shouted about more loudly?
Well, the gender was obviously a factor in the beginning, although she didn't start to admit that until as late as 2013. But the problem was that men didn't know how to deal with a female leader. They thought of her initially as a temporary replacement until some of her rivals could get their acts back together after their own personal scandals. And it turns out that she was so popular, she became their best campaign weapon in 2009 and again in 2013. So her easing into ever more sort of gender equal policies, her support for, if not personal support for gay marriage, but a lot of these other kinds of issues that were out there, have to do again with her having been deprived of many of these freedoms in the earlier part of her year.
We're talking about a time of change, and yet the two people most talked about as to be successors as Chancellor, Markus Söder and Armin Laschet, are hardly from a new generation. Is there any possibility that there could be an outlier here, somebody with charisma, somebody from a new generation, somebody to take Germany forward that would appeal to this new generation of voters?
Well, you are actually pointing out to one thing that the previous speaker did not mention, and this is she is a power gambler. She is someone who coordinates power. And this is something that she learned throughout the years before becoming chancellor, and she masters this. But one of the drawbacks is that she is known for cleaning the field, politically eliminating anyone who could be dangerous for her. And she's been doing it for years. And when you're talking about the lack of new generation around her, also around her successors, no one who would have an appeal and a probability to succeed her, that's her responsibility and her failure as a leader, because she looked at it as power game within the party rather than looking at it as responsibility to secure the future of her party. And we are seeing now the results. Two, especially one of them, who is more probably has more chances, absolutely colorless and absolutely kind of gray person. And no one on the horizon.
Is that Laschet, who I read in one article described as having neither the personality nor the political gravity? Is that Laschet you're talking about?
He probably has a personality. In the European Parliament, a lot of people speak highly of him. He spent some years here as well. But this is not the kind of the emblematic figure who could unify and mobilize people. And this is partly Merkel's fault, that she didn't take care of someone who will succeed her.
Crikey. So Melanie, what does that mean for Germany if that is the case, that there's neither a strong personality, a born leader, or somebody with the force of personality to bring Germany to the fore once again as a powerhouse of Europe waiting in the wings? What does that mean to the country?
Thank you. I've been thinking about this for a while, and there's a song actually by Bob Dylan that often comes to my mind, and it's Changing of the Guards. 16 years, 16 banners are the open lyrics of this song. And I think this is where we are finding ourselves at the moment. There will be a changing of the guards. Now, we also know that Angela Merkel has not governed by herself with her party. So everything she's done and achieved was done in form of a coalition with the others of the People's Party, the Social Democratic Party, which brought a lot of the achievements to the table, as part of the coalition negotiations throughout the years. So what happens at the moment, I think there will be almost an implosion of the Conservative Party. They're not really appealing, in my opinion, to the younger voters. Definitely not with the two people they're putting forward when we're talking about younger generations. And even though in 2013 she had a lot of support by younger people, the first-time voters, now really the Generation Z, they will be looking for people that are very strong on a lot of social causes.
So where will the young people look? Who will be the person from the other side, away from Merkel's centrism, etc.? Where is that person going to come from? And is there any chance that it could be that big a change?
I think they may actually be drawn by the Green Party because of their political stance on a lot of issues and topics that drive the Generation Z at this point.
Okay, well, let's ask Sergey about that. You represent the Greens in the European Parliament, among other groups. A new leader from the Green Party, perhaps new Chancellor coming from that kind of background. Is it possible?
Well, that's the big talk in town, and we will see who of the two candidates from the Green Party will be the actual candidate, which will be announced on the 19th of April, and we will see. I do think that there is something that in this, that there is kind of a legacy from this very responsible, calm, and value-oriented way of doing politics and exercising leadership that is being projected on the Greens at the moment. Moments can change. There is no guarantee that it will remain like this. But because other parties have lost trust and people lost confidence in them on many issues, both Social Democrats, I think this is also a structural issue, that we are in a phase of deindustrializations. The topics are different now, but also the Christian Democrats, who also had some very big scandals regarding kind of sort of corruption, trying to use the situation, some of them the COVID situation, in order to enrich themselves. So both of the large parties are out of the game in a sense, and then
we shall see. I'm sorry to have to hurry you up a little bit on this one, but we're running a little short of time. I want to come to you, Joyce, if I may, in Washington, D.C., becoming Madam Chancellor. Do you think she would think she's been a good one?
Oh, absolutely. But that's also because she has gone through this extended learning experience where she has applied her skills. Yes, she has sort of played the power game or learned to play the power game, but she was treasured at the beginning for being a very good mediator, even at the EU level, and her ability to master the details during the finance crisis, for example, her ability to juggle multiple crises at once, because the Euro crisis kind of flowed into Fukushima, which then flowed into the refugee crisis, which really began after the failure of the Arab Springs. She's just going to be very difficult to replace one way or the other. And so I would argue it's not just the CDU that is lacking in charismatic leaders. The SPD could not draw a dog from behind the oven, as the Germans would say. The only party that really has two charismatic options at this point is the Green Party. And so I fully expect them to play a dominant role in whatever new coalition emerges.
Well, that's going to be extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, to see what happens in September. I'm going to come to you, Melanie, if I may, and say, do you think she will be missed generally in Germany, or only really by the older generation? Will the young people miss her at all?
I think she will be missed. I think there are several things she will be remembered for. She will be remembered for 2010 Fukushima. She will be remembered for this value-based decision on refugees. She will be remembered for her stoicism, the calmness, and she will be remembered as the Chancellor that apologized.
Sergey, your party being tipped as the kingmakers come September. Do you accept the crown?
Well, I'm not one of the candidates whose head will be crowned, but I think that the Greens are in the process of realization that there is a possibility, there is a chance of taking more responsibility than we would have imagined for years. So it's a difficult task, but I think this is a task that at least the candidates are looking for.
And would your message to Angela Merkel come September be Danke? Would it be thank you?
This will be thank you, but this will be thank you by and from a new generation of leaders who say thank you, but it's time to start anew and to develop the legacy into something that is more forward-looking and future-oriented, because this is something that has been lacking and people were missing some more future-oriented orientation.
Listen, thank you very much indeed. So it will be Danke, but not Auf Wiedersehen. Not that we will see you again. She will be saying goodbye permanently. Thank you very much indeed, Joyce in Washington, D.C., Sergey there in Brussels, and Melanie talking to us from Germany. We appreciate your time on this program very much indeed. Absolutely fascinating. Wherever you happen to be watching this edition of Roundtable, we appreciate your time too, and we hope you'll join us next time. But for now, from me, David Foster, and the team, it's goodbye.